Since the dawn of civilization, humanity has sought answers to life's biggest questions. Why are we here? What is our purpose? Is there a divine truth? And if so, which path leads to it? Religious belief has shaped cultures, inspired profound acts of kindness, and guided millions in their search for meaning. But it has also been used to control, manipulate, and deceive. How do we know which faith, if any, is true? Can we separate divine revelation from human invention? This project is not about attacking religion. It is about equipping you with the tools to examine religious claims critically, fairly, and objectively. Whether you are a devout believer, a skeptic, or somewhere in between, this series will help you answer fundamental questions by exploring several key areas of religious inquiry. We will look at the following areas. First, historical investigation. Do religious origins hold up to evidence, or have they been revised and mythologized? Then on to ethical and moral examination. Do religious teachings reflect universal morality, or do they justify harm and oppression? Next, we will do a logical and philosophical analysis. Are religious doctrines internally consistent, or do they contradict themselves? We will follow that with sociological and psychological scrutiny. Do religions use psychological control tactics to maintain belief? We will then do a comparative religious analysis. If multiple religions claim to be the one true faith, how do we determine which, if any, is correct? And lastly, we'll conduct an empirical testing of claims. Do miracles, prayers, and prophecies produce measurable, repeatable results? In each area of discussion, we will use examples from religions all around the world and throughout time, encouraging you to analyze not only the beliefs of others but also your own. Religious belief is often deeply personal, tied to identity, culture, and community. But is it based on truth or tradition? If we are to claim we seek truth, we must be willing to test what we believe, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. Are you ready to question? Are you ready to explore? If so, then let's begin. What if everything you were taught about a religion's history wasn't quite what it seemed? What if the truth was hidden beneath centuries of revision, myth-making, and well-intentioned storytelling? Today, we're diving into historical investigation, the first step in determining whether a religion that claims to be the one true faith holds up to scrutiny. To understand a religion's legitimacy, we must start with its founder. Who were they? What was their character? Did they live by the principles they preached? More importantly, did they make claims that were demonstrably false? And you almost certainly won't learn this by only reading or listening to the material produced by the faith that founder created. Rather, you will need to be open to looking at what the experts, critics, and scholarship written outside that faith have to say as well. Take L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. Hubbard himself claimed to be a decorated war hero and a brilliant scientist, yet historical records show that many of his claims were exaggerated or outright false. And Scientology, the religion, doesn't go out of its way to correct the record. Hubbard's supposed war injuries, for example, were not supported by his military records, but Scientology. The system continues to hold Hubbard up as a war hero. This raises two critical questions. Number one, if a religion's founder bends the truth about their own life and experience, can their teachings be trusted? And number two, should we expect that religious system to cripple their truth claims by exposing any less favorable aspects of their founder? Or in other words, should we reasonably expect that every religious system will paint their founder in the most positive, faith-affirming way? On the flip side, consider the Buddha. Unlike many religious founders that he claimed divine authority, he focused on philosophical teachings and self-discovery. While later Buddhist traditions deified him, his original approach was more about methodology than absolute truth claims. When evaluating a religion, examine the life of its founder. Were they honest? Did they have motives beyond spirituality, such as power, wealth, sex, or influence? These questions matter. If a religion is true, we'd expect its sacred texts to be reliable. But are they? Let's look at three key issues: anachronisms, contradictions, and plagiarism. The Book of Mormon, for example, claimed to be an ancient record from the Americas, happens to contain direct quotations from the New Testament in ways that the alleged ancient authors of the book would have had no access to. The book even includes biblical translation errors from the 17th century, as well as mounds of material contemporary to Joseph Smith, Mormonism's founder. This raises serious questions, as in how could a supposedly ancient document contain word-for-word passages from sources with which the alleged ancient authors would have had no contact with? Anachronisms like this indicate that the text may not be what it claims to be. The book of Genesis describes the creation of the world with a firmament, a solid dome separating the waters above from the waters below. This reflects ancient Near Eastern cosmology, where the sky was believed to be a physical structure holding back celestial waters. Modern science, however, has shown that the sky is not a solid dome but an atmosphere extending into the vastness of space. If divine revelation inspired the Bible, why does its cosmology mirror ancient human misconceptions rather than scientific reality? Many Christian denominations, drawing from biblical genealogies, long taught that the Earth was approximately 6,000 years old. This belief persisted for centuries until modern geology and radiometric dating demonstrated that the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. If the Bible was divinely inspired, why did its timeline reflect ancient human calculations rather than accurate scientific knowledge? These inconsistencies suggest that oral tradition and human error played a role in shaping the final text. By examining a religion's sacred texts critically, we can determine the likelihood of whether they are historically reliable or if they contain red flags that suggest human invention and myth-making played a significant part. Many religions claim divine revelation through prophecy. But here's the test. Did the prophecies actually come true? And were they specific or conveniently vague? The Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, predicted that Christ would return and the world would end in 1874. When that didn't happen, they revised their interpretation to revise the date to 1914 and have revised the meaning multiple times since. A true prophecy shouldn't require re-explanation after it fails. In Hinduism, there's a prophecy of Kalki, a future avatar of Vishnu, who will appear to end the current age of darkness. But like many religious prophecies, it remains vague and open-ended, making it impossible to disprove. This is another common strategy, keeping prophecies ambiguous enough that they can never be definitively tested. Another way of asking is, why are inspired religious leaders always adapting to a wicked, changing world rather than leading with truth out front and being proven right by a world that is continually learning? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the LDS Church, or more commonly, the Mormons, teach that temple ordinances, such as their endowment ceremony, are divinely revealed and eternal, and their founder stated, quote, "The ordinances of the gospel were laid out before the foundations of the world and are not to be altered or changed. All must be saved on the same principles," unquote. However, throughout the church's history, these rituals have undergone major changes. For example, in 1990, the temple endowment ceremony was significantly revised, removing penalties and certain dramatic elements that had been present for over a century. In 2019, another set of changes was made to make the ceremony more gender-inclusive. These alterations contradict earlier teachings that these ordinances were given directly from God and were not subject to change. If they were truly divinely mandated, why have they been revised to align more with modern cultural sensitivities? This raises a fundamental question. Is divine revelation truly unchanging, or is it evolving based on societal pressures? Christianity fractured into thousands of sects after the Reformation, each claiming to follow the, quote, true gospel. If divine truth is absolute, Why is there so much division over what it actually is? Doctrines that change to fit social or political pressures suggest human influence rather than divine revelation. Have you ever questioned whether a religion's moral teachings truly reflect divine wisdom, or if they were created by those grasping for power to create order, dissuade criticism, and punish independence? And whether that morality simply evolves to keep up with society? What if moral consistency, rather than devotion, is the real measure of truth? Today, we'll be looking at how ethical and moral examination can help us determine whether a religion is truly divine or a product of human culture and control. A religion that claims divine origins should have moral teachings that remain consistent and timeless. But do they? Many faiths claim absolute morality, yet history tells a different story, one where teachings shift in response to societal pressures. For over a century, the Mormons or LDS Church explicitly taught that black men were divinely prohibited from holding the priesthood, and both black male and female members were prohibited from the faith's higher ordinances. It was taught that such was due to their bearing a curse from God and having been less righteous in the heavens before their birth. This doctrine was enforced from 1852 until 1978. Leaders such as Brigham Young and others claimed this restriction was God's will and would not until long after Christ's return and second coming. However, under increasing social and political pressure, alongside declining international missionary success, the Church reversed its stance in 1978 through what it called official declaration. And in recent years, the Church has disavowed its earlier teachings around curses and premortal righteousness. This dramatic reversal raises the question: if the original doctrine was divinely inspired, why was its theology disavowed and why did it change? And if it wasn't divinely inspired, was it ever truly from God in the first place? This inconsistency suggests that human decision-making, not divine decree, plays a role in shaping religious morality. Jehovah's Witnesses have long been known for their opposition to blood transfusions, citing biblical prohibitions against consuming blood. However, for nearly 2 decades, from 1967 to 1980, the Watchtower Society also explicitly banned organ transplants, stating that accepting an organ was equivalent to cannibalism and therefore a sin. Witnesses who received transplants were at risk of excommunication. Then, in 1980, the organization quietly reversed this stance, leaving many to wonder. If the initial prohibition was divinely guided, why was it later deemed a matter of personal choice? And what happened to those who had refused life-saving procedures based on the original teaching? When evaluating a religion, ask, are its moral rules internally consistent, or do they change conveniently to fit human needs and external pressures? A moral system should promote good, not justify harm. Yet, history is filled with examples of religions enforcing rigid moral systems that result in real-world suffering, even while claiming moral superiority. Many religious traditions emphasize sin, repentance, and worthiness in a way that creates deep-seated guilt and anxiety. For example, in conservative Christian traditions, people are often taught that even their thoughts can be sinful, whether it's doubt, sexual desire, or questioning authority. Over time, this can lead to obsessive guilt, depression, and even self-loathing. The harm isn't always obvious because these feelings are framed as spiritual growth or humility. But is a moral system truly divine if it causes people to feel inherently broken rather than whole? Many religious teachings emphasize unconditional forgiveness, which can be a beautiful concept, but also a harmful one when misapplied. Some Christian and Buddhist traditions, for example, stress that true believers must forgive no matter what, even in cases of abuse or deep betrayal. In some religious communities, survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, or other serious harm are pressured to let go and reconcile with their abuser rather than seeking justice or safety. The harm here is subtle because forgiveness is framed as a virtue. But should a moral system encourage reconciliation at the expense of personal safety and accountability? When investigating a religion, ask, does it create a better, more just society? Or does it use morality as a tool for control and harm? One of the biggest ethical red flags in any religion is how it treats those who question or leave. If a belief system is true, it should stand on its own merits, not through fear, coercion, or punishment for dissent. In fact, a true religion should have safe space for disagreement and questioning of the system, for what does the truth have to fear? The Amish are known for their tight-knit communities, but what happens if someone wants to leave? Many Amish groups practice shunning, a system where ex-members are cut off from their families, friends, and entire way of life. Imagine growing up in a community, then being completely abandoned just for asking questions. A moral system rooted in truth should welcome inquiry, not punish it. Scientology ex-members often face severe social alienation. Former Scientologists have reported being cut off from their families, subjected to harassment, and even labeled as suppressive persons, as well as allegations of physical punishments. This can lead to immense guilt, psychological, emotional, and physical trauma, and a loss of family and community support systems. If a religion truly had the ultimate truth, why would it need fear-based tactics to keep followers in line? Many religious traditions use the concept of eternal reward or punishment to keep followers in line, often from a very young age. For example, in certain fundamentalist Christian circles, children are taught that questioning their faith could lead to eternal damnation. Similarly, in some Buddhist and Hindu traditions, doubting religious authority could be seen as accumulating negative karma that leads to a worse reincarnation. The harm here is subtle because it doesn't involve physical punishment, yet it instills lifelong anxiety about questioning, growing, or leaving the faith. If a moral system relies on fear rather than reason, can it truly be called moral? If a religion is true, why must it resort to violence and intimidation in any of its forms to prevent people from leaving or speaking out? Most of the world agrees that punishment by death to a teenage girl for not wearing her hijab correctly is evil and immoral. But what if the forms of punishment and control are more subtle? Would you still notice them? A true moral system should encourage free thought, not enforce belief through punishment or social exile. When evaluating any religion, ask yourself, how does it treat those who doubt, question, or leave? Is morality a tool for understanding or a weapon for control? If a religion's moral system constantly changes, justifies harm, or punishes doubt, then it isn't built on eternal truth, it's built on human agendas. No religion should be exempt from scrutiny, including the one closest to you. A truly moral system should withstand questioning, promote well-being, and remain internally consistent across time and culture. The challenge isn't just to examine other religions, it's to examine your own. Can your faith pass the test of true morality? Or have you simply assumed it does? The answer may be more complex than you think. Religions claim to hold the ultimate truth, but how often do we stop and ask, does this make sense? Are these beliefs internally consistent? Do they hold up to logical scrutiny? In this section, we're diving into logical and philosophical analysis, the third critical tool for determining whether a religion that claims to be the one true faith actually makes sense. One of the simplest yet most powerful ways to test a religion's claims is to ask, do its doctrines contradict themselves? If a religion is divinely inspired, its teaching should be logically sound and free from internal contradictions. After all, it was God Himself who delivered the beliefs, theology, and doctrines. But history shows that many religious systems contain contradictions that are difficult or impossible to resolve. For centuries, the Catholic Church taught that unbaptized infants who died would go to a state of existence called limbo, a place neither of suffering nor of heaven, but where souls were deprived of the beatific vision of God. This doctrine was reinforced by many popes and theologians over hundreds of years. However, in 2007, the Vatican officially stated that limbo was a theological hypothesis rather than a doctrine, and that God's mercy could allow unbaptized infants to enter heaven. This reversal directly contradicts the Church's earlier stance that baptism was absolutely necessary for salvation. If divine truth is eternal, why did a fundamental teaching about the fate of souls change so dramatically? A truly divine moral system should not contradict itself. If a faith makes conflicting claims about reality, how can we determine which of the claims to follow? Religions often make bold claims about the supernatural, miracles, divine interventions, sacred texts revealed by God. But can they provide objective evidence? Or are we just expected to take these claims on faith? In any rational system, the burden of proof lies on the person making the claim. If a religion claims to possess ultimate truth, then it should be able to prove it. The Book of Abraham is one of the canonical scriptures of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, claimed by Joseph Smith to be a translation of ancient Egyptian papyri that he purchased in 1835. Smith stated that these scrolls contained the writings of Abraham himself, which he, through divine revelation, translated into what became part of LDS scripture. However, in the 20th century, scholars rediscovered portions of these papyri and were now able to translate them from their native language to English. Instead of containing anything related to Abraham, the papyri were identified as common Egyptian funerary texts, nothing to do with the biblical patriarch. This presents a major contradiction. If Joseph Smith was truly translating by the power of God, why does his translation not match what Egyptologists can now read? Instead of addressing the fundamental issue, LDS apologists have shifted explanations, arguing that the Book of Abraham was perhaps revealed spiritually rather than being a literal translation. This directly contradicts Smith's original claim that he was providing a literal translation of an ancient record. If divine truth is consistent and unchanging, why does the explanation for the Book of Abraham need to evolve after the evidence contradicts its original claims? This raises a crucial question. If one of Mormonism's foundational scriptures is demonstrably incorrect, what does that suggest about the validity of its other truth claims? Many Pentecostal churches claim miraculous healings occur through prayer and divine intervention. However, when tested under controlled scientific conditions, these miracles fail to produce documented results. If divine healing is real, why does it only seem to work in emotionally charged environments rather than in verifiable, repeatable circumstances? If an extraordinary claim is made, extraordinary evidence should follow. If a religion makes supernatural claims, it must provide more than anecdotal evidence. A system based on truth should be demonstrable, not just a matter of faith. One of the biggest red flags in any belief system is special pleading. When exceptions are made to justify contradictions, that would be unacceptable in any other situation. If a belief system requires unique loopholes to avoid scrutiny, it suggests an effort to protect a human-made doctrine rather than uphold divine truth. The Jehovah's Witnesses predicted that the world would end multiple times, most notably in 1914, 1925, and 1975. When these prophecies failed, the organization revised its explanations, saying the predictions were misunderstood or spiritually fulfilled, rather than literally. But why does a supposedly divine organization require ongoing adjustments and reinterpretations to maintain credibility? Wouldn't true divine prophecy be accurate from the start? Many New Age spiritual leaders and Eastern gurus claim divine enlightenment, Yet when they are caught in scandals, financial exploitation, abuse, or hypocrisy, followers often justify their actions by saying they are beyond our understanding or the actions are tests for us. If moral standards are universal, then why do religious figures get exceptions? A moral system that applies double standards is a human system, not a divine one. If a belief system must constantly make exceptions to justify contradictions, can it really claim to be based on universal truth? Many religions rely on a dangerous logical fallacy known as circular reasoning, proving their claims by referencing their own scriptures or authority figures rather than independent evidence. If the only proof of a religion's truth is because the Holy Book says so, then that's not proof, it's an assumption. Islam teaches that the Quran is the direct word of God and is therefore infallible. However, when asked for proof of this claim, the most common response is, quote, "Because the Quran says so," unquote. But why should a book's claim about itself be taken as evidence? This is the very definition of circular reasoning. If a text is divine, then its truth should be verifiable beyond its own assertions. The Catholic Church teaches that the Pope is infallible when making official doctrinal declarations. But how do we know this is true? Because church tradition says so. And how do we know church tradition is correct? Because the Pope upholds it. This circular reasoning prevents external verification, making it impossible to question the claim logically. A true belief system should be able to stand on evidence, not just self-referential claims. Circular reasoning is not proof, it's a trap. If a religion contradicts itself, fails to provide evidence, requires special pleading, and relies on circular reasoning, can it truly be called divine? A belief system that is truly inspired should be logically sound, consistent, and open to scrutiny, not dependent on loopholes and blind faith. The real challenge isn't just to apply this analysis to other religions, it's to apply it to your own. Are you willing to test your beliefs using the same rational methods you would use to examine others? Religious belief shapes lives, provides meaning, and builds communities. But what happens when faith moves beyond inspiration and into control? In this segment, we're diving into sociological and psychological scrutiny, analyzing how religions can manipulate followers, enforce control, and suppress critical thinking, all while maintaining the illusion of choice. Religious belief shapes lives, provides meaning, and builds communities. But what happens when faith moves beyond inspiration and into control? In this segment, we're diving into sociological and psychological scrutiny, analyzing how religions can manipulate followers, enforce control, and suppress critical thinking, all while maintaining the illusion of choice. Most religions claim to offer guidance and purpose, but some cross the line from guidance to psychological manipulation. One of the strongest tools at their disposal? Fear. Fear of eternal damnation, fear of divine disapproval, fear of losing one's family and community. In strict Islamic sects, apostasy, leaving the faith, is considered a severe crime. While many Muslims live in communities that allow personal belief, some fundamentalist interpretations impose harsh social and legal consequences for questioning or leaving Islam. Some countries enforce apostasy laws where rejecting the faith can result in imprisonment or even death. This creates a psychological prison. Even if someone deeply doubts, the cost of leaving is so high that they may remain trapped. Is this faith or coercion? For example, the LDS Church, commonly known as the Mormons, teaches that families can be sealed together for eternity, but only if they remain faithful and follow all church teachings. This means that if someone leaves the faith, they risk losing their eternal family. Many ex-Mormons report feeling profound guilt and anxiety about their decision, even when they logically reject church doctrine. If a belief system requires emotional blackmail to maintain loyalty, is it truly divine guidance or a tool of control? The more a religion relies on fear to keep people from questioning or leaving, the more we should question whether it is guiding believers or trapping them. What happens when a religion's core claims don't match reality? When new information contradicts sacred teachings? For many believers, this creates cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort of holding two conflicting beliefs at the same time. Rather than critically evaluating their faith, many are given prepackaged explanations that help them ignore contradictions rather than resolve them. The Children of God, later rebranded as the Family International, was a religious movement that taught that sex could be used as a tool for evangelism, a practice called flirty fishing. Women in the group were encouraged to engage in sexual relationships to bring men to Jesus. However, as the group faced growing legal scrutiny and public backlash, leaders gradually distanced themselves from the practice and eventually abandoned it in the 1980s. Rather than admitting that flirty fishing was an abusive and exploitative doctrine, leadership justified the change by claiming that it had served its purposes and was no longer needed. This shifting narrative allowed followers to remain committed despite clear evidence that their earlier beliefs and actions had caused significant harm. This is a clear case of cognitive dissonance management. When faced with undeniable contradictions, beliefs are reframed rather than abandoned. The Unification Church, founded by Sun Myung Moon, teaches that Moon and his wife were the true parents who would create a sinless lineage through their arranged mass marriages. Followers were taught that their marriages, arranged by church leaders, were divinely selected and necessary to fulfill God's plan. However, after Moon's death in 2012, leadership struggles erupted within the church and his own family fractured, his wife and sons splitting into rival factions. If Moon was truly the Messiah and his marriage was divinely ordained, why did his own perfect lineage collapse? Rather than acknowledging the failure of their foundational belief, church leaders reframed the division as a test of faith. This is a classic example of cognitive dissonance resolution. When reality contradicts belief, the explanation is modified to maintain faith rather than question the doctrine itself. True faith should be able to withstand critical thinking. But when religions rely on mental gymnastics to explain contradictions, we should ask, is this belief based on truth or simply on the need to believe? One of the biggest red flags in any belief system is high-demand control. When religion dictates every aspect of life, from what you wear to who you marry to how much money you give, the more a faith seeks to control, the less room it leaves for personal freedom. In many Orthodox Jewish communities, men and women must adhere to strict dress codes. Women covering their hair and dressing modestly, men wearing specific garments like the kippah and tzitzit. These rules aren't optional, they are enforced through social pressure, and violating them can result in ostracization from the community. While framed as religious devotion, the underlying effect is control, forcing individuals to conform under the threat of social punishment. In some evangelical prosperity gospel movements, financial giving is seen as a direct investment in divine blessings. Members are told that donating 10% or more of their income guarantees wealth and health. Some preachers even suggest that failing to tithe might invite financial hardship or disease, creating a financial obligation rooted in fear rather than generosity. If divine blessings are for sale, is this faith or spiritual extortion? The Unification Church, also known as the Moonies, is infamous for arranging marriages for its members, often between complete strangers. Followers believe that church leaders have divine authority to select their spouse, and refusing an arranged marriage can lead to social isolation or punishment. A religion that dictates something as personal as marriage is not fostering spiritual growth. It is controlling lives. When a religion controls how you dress, who you marry, and how you spend your money, it's no longer just a belief system. It's a high-demand group. And the higher the demand, the greater the need for scrutiny. A true spiritual path should offer guidance, not coercion. It should encourage curiosity, not fear. It should enrich lives, not restrict them. But when a religion relies on psychological pressure, mental gymnastics, and total control over daily life, it's time to ask, is this truly divine or just a well-crafted system of human control? The real challenge isn't just to recognize these tactics in other religions, it's to examine your own. Are you following faith? Or are you following fear? The difference may be more subtle than you think. Many religions claim to be the one true faith. But how can that be possible when multiple religions make the same claim? How do we determine which, if any, holds exclusive truth? Today, we're diving into comparative religious analysis, breaking down how religions borrow from one another, claim moral superiority, and insist on their own exclusivity. If there's only one true religion, which one is it? Many faiths claim to offer the only path to salvation or enlightenment, but these claims are mutually exclusive. They can't all be right, so how do we decide which, if any, is telling the truth? Christianity teaches that salvation comes only through Jesus Christ. No one comes to the Father except through me, John 14:6. Islam, on the other hand, asserts that the only path to God is through submission to Allah and following the teachings of Muhammad. These claims directly contradict one another. Both cannot be simultaneously true. The fact that competing religions make identical claims about exclusivity suggests that these beliefs are likely culturally constructed rather than divinely revealed. If divine truth exists, why would it be revealed so differently to different peoples? And if you deal with this by simply believing your faith is right and all other faiths are wrong or less than in some way, perhaps you can notice not only that every faith has believers who are sure that their variation of religion is right and all others are wrong, but also how unlikely that you are one of the lucky few, comparatively speaking, who finds themselves born at the right time and the right place to be among God's elect. Unlike Christianity and Islam, Hinduism takes a more universalist approach, teaching that many paths can lead to the divine. However, this creates another challenge. If multiple paths lead to truth, then exclusive religions like Christianity and Islam must be mistaken in their claims of sole authority. This paradox forces us to ask, is truth absolute and singular, or is it relative and personal? And if truth varies depending on culture and history, can any religion truly claim exclusivity? The fact that every major religion has competing truth claims should make us pause and ask, if divine truth is universal, why is it so fragmented? If a religion is truly divine, its teachings should be original and unique. But history tells us a different story. Many core religious beliefs, symbols, and myths have been borrowed from earlier traditions. Before Jesus, ancient mythologies already contained stories of gods who died and were resurrected. Osiris in Egyptian mythology and Dionysus in Greek tradition all had elements of death and rebirth, often linked to themes of salvation or renewal. This raises an important question. Did Christianity introduce a brand new divine truth, or did it repurpose an older pattern of religious storytelling? If Jesus' resurrection is supposed to be unique, why does it resemble so many pre-Christian myths? The concept of a divine or miraculous birth is not unique to Christianity's story of Jesus. Within Buddhism, some traditions state that the Buddha's mother, Maya, conceived him without normal human conception. If the virgin birth of Jesus were truly a unique divine event, why do so many pre-Christian traditions contain nearly identical themes? The presence of these stories across different cultures suggests that they may be archetypal myths rather than literal historical events. The presence of recycled myths across different religions suggests that human storytelling, rather than divine revelation, is shaping religious narratives. Religions often claim to have a unique moral code, insisting that their teachings are superior to all others. But are religious morals truly unique, or are they simply repackaged versions of universal ethical principles? Many religions claim to have received divine instruction on how humans should treat one another, yet core moral teachings are often identical across faiths. Consider the Golden Rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This principle is found in Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, and even Confucianism. If morality were truly exclusive to a single religion, we wouldn't expect to see the same ethical teachings repeated across so many traditions. This suggests that morality is more human than divine, rooted in shared social experience rather than exclusive religious revelation. While many religious groups claim moral superiority, history shows that violence, discrimination, and oppression have been justified in the name of religion. Christianity had the Inquisitions. Islam had the spread of conquest through jihad. Hinduism historically supported caste discrimination, and Buddhism has been involved in nationalist violence in Myanmar and Sri Lanka. If a religion claims to be the exclusive source of morality, why do we see the same patterns of ethical failure across multiple faiths? The reality is that religious moral teachings often reflect human nature and cultural development rather than divine wisdom. When a religion claims unique access to moral truth, we must ask, is this morality truly divine? Or is it simply an extension of universal human ethics? When we compare religious traditions, we find that multiple religions claim to be the one true path, yet their doctrines contradict one another. Core religious myths and symbols are borrowed from earlier traditions. Moral teachings are shared across multiple faiths, undermining any claim of unique divine revelation. If divine truth exists, why is it so fragmented, recycled, and universally accessible? If a religion claims to have the absolute truth, we must ask, is this claim based on evidence or simply on the desire to believe? Are we following truth or are we following tradition? The answer may be more complex than we think. Religion is often seen as a force for good, guiding people to live moral and meaningful lives. But what happens when faith is also a business? When religious institutions amass vast wealth while their followers struggle to make ends meet, we have to ask, is this about salvation or financial gain? Today, we're diving into the financial transparency and material interests of religious organizations, analyzing how money is collected, controlled, and spent. Throughout history, religious institutions have accumulated vast amounts of wealth, often while preaching humility, charity, and sacrifice. But how much wealth is too much? And at what point does a faith-based institution become a corporate empire? The Vatican is one of the wealthiest institutions in the world, with assets that include priceless art, real estate, and investments. Yet, for centuries, it has collected money from everyday Catholics, many of whom are poor, through offerings and donations. While the Church does engage in charitable work, critics argue that much of its wealth remains untouched, even as it asks followers to contribute more. If a religion is meant to serve the needy, why does it hoard resources rather than distribute them? In the US, certain televangelists have built personal empires by asking for donations, promising that God will reward financial giving with blessings. Some own private jets, luxury mansions, and extravagant lifestyles, all funded by their congregants. Figures like Joel Osteen, Kenneth Copeland, and Creflo Dollar live in multi-million-dollar estates while many of their followers live paycheck to paycheck. If religious leaders truly believed in humility and service, why do they live in excess while their believers struggle? At what point does religious wealth cross the line from sustenance to exploitation? The answer often lies in financial secrecy. Many religious institutions operate outside financial transparency laws, keeping their incomes, expenses, and assets hidden from public view. But if a faith organization is truly acting in the best interests of its members, why wouldn't it disclose how money is being spent? For decades, The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church, refused to disclose financial records to its members. In 2019, whistleblower reports revealed that the church had amassed over $100 billion in investment funds, largely from tithes and donations. While leaders justified the $150 billion reserve as a rainy day fund, members began questioning why a tax-exempt religious institution needed to accumulate such enormous wealth. If a church demands tithing as a sign of faith, should it not also provide transparency about where that money goes? Scientology operates as a tax-exempt religious organization, yet it has been accused of running more like a corporate empire. Despite accumulating millions in real estate and revenue, it provides little financial transparency to either the public or its own members. Those who try to leave often struggle financially, having given large sums in the form of donations for spiritual advancement. If a religion prioritizes wealth protection over financial openness, is it truly about faith or financial control? Without transparency, financial exploitation becomes far easier, especially when donations are tied to spiritual consequences. Many religions encourage giving as an act of faith, but what happens when donations are required, sometimes under the threat of spiritual punishment? The LDS Church requires members to pay 10% of their income in tithing to remain in good standing and qualify for a temple recommend. Without this, they are unable to participate in key religious ceremonies, including eternal family sealings. For struggling families, this means choosing between financial security and religious approval. If tithing is truly about faith, should it not be voluntary rather than a requirement for spiritual privileges? Many prosperity gospel preachers promise that giving money to God, often meaning their ministry, will result in financial blessings. This creates a system where struggling believers donate money they can't afford, believing that God will reward them. Yet, when those blessings don't come, the blame is often placed on the followers' lack of faith. If donations come with promised supernatural rewards, is this faith or spiritual extortion? If salvation comes at a financial cost, we must ask, is this faith or is it a transaction? Perhaps the most revealing sign of financial exploitation is the gap between religious leadership wealth and the financial burdens placed on members. If religious leaders claim to be servants of God, shouldn't they lead by example in financial humility? Televangelist Kenneth Copeland owns a private airport, a fleet of jets, and multiple mansions. He justifies this wealth by claiming that God wants him to spread the gospel in comfort. Meanwhile, his followers, many of whom live paycheck to paycheck, are asked to give sacrificially to his ministry. If wealth is a sign of divine favor, why does God favor preachers while their followers struggle? The Vatican's priceless assets and investments contrast sharply with the poverty of many Catholic followers worldwide. While popes and cardinals live in luxurious quarters, millions of Catholics in developing countries donate what little they have to support the Church. If charity and humility are central Christian values, should the Church's wealth not be more evenly distributed? If a religion asks followers to sacrifice financially while its leaders live in comfort, we must ask, is this truly about faith or is it about power and profit? Religious institutions claim to exist for the spiritual benefit of their followers, but when money takes center stage, we must question their true motives. Transparency, fairness, and ethical financial management should be the hallmarks of any faith that claims moral authority. If a religion prioritizes wealth, secrecy, and financial pressure, is it truly divine, or is it just another business? The real challenge isn't just to question other religions, it's to question our own. Are we giving in faith, or are we funding an empire? The evidence, if we choose to see it, may be more revealing than we think. Throughout history, religious leaders have been revered as spiritual guides, chosen by the divine to lead people toward truth. But what happens when those leaders fail to live up to their own moral teachings? When authority is abused rather than upheld? In this segment, we're diving into the examination of leadership and authority in religion, analyzing moral character, claims of infallibility, and the consequences of questioning authority. One of the most telling signs of a religion's credibility is the behavior of its leaders. If a faith claims divine authority, its leadership should embody the highest moral and ethical standards. But history tells a different story, one filled with fraud, scandal, and abuse that directly contradicts the virtues these leaders preach. Many well-known televangelists, such as Jim Bakker and Jimmy Swaggart, have been embroiled in financial and sexual scandals while continuing to claim divine anointing. Bakker defrauded his followers out of millions, yet after serving time in prison, he returned to television, still asking for donations. If a leader is truly chosen by God, shouldn't their actions reflect divine integrity rather than deception and greed? For decades, the Catholic Church systematically covered up widespread sexual abuse by clergy members. Rather than holding abusers accountable, church officials reassigned them to different parishes, protecting the institution rather than the victims. If religious leaders are supposed to be moral authorities, why does history reveal such a pattern of enabling wrongdoing rather than preventing it? If religious leaders cannot be held to the ethical standards they impose on their followers, what does that say about their supposed divine calling? Many religions teach that their leaders are divinely guided and cannot be wrong in matters of doctrine. But what happens when history proves otherwise? Should faith in leadership override evidence? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints teaches that its prophets speak for God. However, past prophets have made doctrinal declarations that later had to be reversed, such as the former ban on black men receiving the priesthood. For over a century, church leaders defended this restriction as divine will, only for it to be lifted in 1978. If God is unchanging, why did his supposed revelations shift under social and political pressure? A truly divine leader not require constant revision to his teachings if leadership claims to be the trusted voice of a supreme being, yet repeatedly changes doctrine. Should we trust their authority? In many religious traditions, questioning leadership is not just discouraged, it's punished. Excommunication and shunning are powerful tools used to silence dissent, maintain control, and prevent scrutiny of leadership. But if a religion is based on truth, why does it fear critical examination? Jehovah's Witnesses practice disfellowshipping, completely cutting off members who question doctrine or leave the faith. Families are instructed to shun their own relatives, sometimes leading to emotional devastation and social isolation. If truth can withstand scrutiny, why must questioning it result in punishment? In the various polygamous factions of Mormonism, excommunication is used to silence those who criticize the doctrine of polygamy or question the authority of the leaders. Members who speak out are often ostracized, and their families may be encouraged to sever ties with them. If the faith's teachings are divinely ordained, why is there a need to silence dissent with such harsh consequences? The Druze community practices a form of social exclusion known as banishment for those who openly disagree with the religious leadership or leave the faith. Those who are banished are cut off from their family and social networks. If the Druze religion values unity and truth, why does it resort to exclusion as a means of maintaining conformity? The Exclusive Brethren, a conservative Christian sect, practices shunning, excluding members who disagree with church teachings or who leave the community. This practice can extend to isolating family members who attempt to maintain relationships with the shunned individual. If the faith truly promotes love and unity, why is alienation used to maintain doctrinal purity? A faith that punishes doubt rather than encouraging understanding may not be a faith in truth, but a system built on control. Religious leaders are supposed to be moral guides, but history shows that many have engaged in deception, exploitation, and absolute control. If faith is about truth, its leadership should withstand scrutiny, not demand blind obedience. The real challenge isn't just examining other religions, it's questioning our own. Are we following leaders because they are truly moral, or because we've been told they must be? The answer may be more revealing than we think. Religion is often described as a deeply personal and transformative experience. But how much of it is divine, and how much can be explained by psychology and neuroscience? Today, we're diving into the psychological and neurological factors behind religious belief, exploring how the brain, emotions, and cognitive techniques shape faith. Many religious traditions describe profound spiritual experiences, visions, divine voices, and feelings of overwhelming peace or connection. But modern neuroscience suggests that these experiences may not be supernatural at all. Could they be the result of neurological activity rather than divine intervention? Some individuals with temporal lobe epilepsy report experiencing visions, hearing voices, or feeling an intense sense of divine presence. Experiences strikingly similar to religious revelations. The famous Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky had temporal lobe epilepsy and described experiencing an overwhelming feeling of enlightenment, much like religious figures throughout history. If religious visions can be replicated by brain activity alone, how can we distinguish divine encounters from neurological phenomena? Indigenous cultures and spiritual seekers have long used psychedelic substances such as psilocybin, magic mushrooms, and ayahuasca to induce mystical experiences. In modern studies, psychedelics have been shown to reliably produce profound spiritual insights, unity with the universe, and even encounters with seemingly divine beings. If chemicals can trigger the same sacred experiences as prayer or meditation, does this suggest that religious experiences are brain-generated rather than externally given? If different neurological and chemical states can create identical religious sensations, we must ask, is the experience truly divine, or is it simply a product of the mind? Religion can offer comfort, hope, and a sense of community. But for many, it also brings guilt, anxiety, and fear. Does religion promote mental well-being, or can it be psychologically damaging? Some individuals who leave high-control religious groups experience religious trauma syndrome, RTS, a psychological condition involving anxiety, depression, and extreme guilt. This is particularly common in sects that emphasize eternal punishment, purity culture, and strict obedience. If a belief system causes lifelong fear and shame, can it truly be called a source of peace? On the other hand, religious practices like prayer, meditation, and gratitude rituals have been shown to reduce stress and improve emotional resilience. Many find that faith provides structure, purpose, and social support, which can enhance mental well-being. But here's the key question. Does the benefit come from divine truth, or from the psychological effects of belief itself? Could secular meditation or community support offer the same mental health benefits without religious dogma? Religion's impact on mental health isn't black and white. It depends on whether faith empowers individuals or controls them through guilt and fear. A key element of a healthy belief system is the ability to question and think critically. But some religious traditions actively discourage independent thought through what psychologists call thought-stopping techniques. These are phrases or teachings designed to shut down doubt rather than explore it. When confronted with contradictions or difficult theological questions, many believers are told, "God works in mysterious ways." This phrase serves as a thought-terminating cliché, preventing deeper inquiry into the problem. If a belief system is true, should it not welcome scrutiny rather than deflect it? Many high-demand religious groups use repetitive chanting, prayer, or mantras to create a trance-like state. While this can be meditative, it can also function as a cognitive control mechanism, replacing independent thought with automatic responses. In cult-like settings, repetitive phrases such as "doubt is the enemy" or "only through faith will you understand" discourage rational analysis. If a belief system relies on mental shortcuts rather than reasoned discussion, is it truly about truth or about control? A belief system confident in its truth should not fear questions, doubt, or scrutiny. When faith discourages independent thought, it becomes a system of indoctrination, not discovery. Religious experiences, mental health effects, and cognitive techniques all point to one major question. Is faith the result of divine intervention, or is it a powerful psychological and neurological phenomenon? If religious visions can be induced by brain activity, if belief systems can heal but also harm, and if doctrines rely on thought-stopping techniques to prevent inquiry, should we trust faith alone? The challenge isn't just to analyze religious experiences in others, it's to examine our own. Are we experiencing the divine or just the incredible power of the human brain? The answer may be more complex than we think. Faith is often described as believing without seeing. But what happens when we actually put religious claims to the test? Can miracles, answered prayers, and prophetic insights be empirically verified? Or do faith-based beliefs thrive precisely because they avoid scrutiny? Today, we're diving into the empirical testing of religious claims, analyzing whether faith delivers real-world results or if belief itself is the true source of its power. Religions around the world teach that prayer has power, that divine intervention can heal the sick, change circumstances, and even alter the course of history. But does prayer actually produce statistically measurable results? When tested, do divine miracles stand up to scrutiny? One of the largest and most rigorous studies on the effects of prayer was the study of the therapeutic effects of intercessory prayer, STEP, conducted in 2006. The study examined 1,800 patients undergoing heart surgery, dividing them into 3 groups: those who were prayed for and didn't know it, and those who received no prayers. The results: no significant difference in recovery rates. In fact, the group that knew they were being prayed for had slightly worse outcomes, possibly due to increased anxiety. If prayer were truly effective in a supernatural sense, shouldn't the results have been undeniable? Many religious movements claim miraculous healings, from blindness being cured to cancer disappearing overnight. Yet when these cases are examined, verified medical documentation is often missing. In some cases, individuals claim healing during a religious service, only to later relapse. But this part of the story is rarely publicized. If divine healing is real, why does it never happen in controlled conditions? Why do amputees never regrow limbs, despite countless testimonies of internal healings? The absence of scientifically verifiable miracles suggests that many so-called healings could be attributed to placebo effects, misdiagnoses, or psychological phenomena rather than divine intervention. If religious miracles and answered prayers are real, we should expect clear, repeatable evidence. But when miracles vanish under scrutiny, shouldn't that make us question their validity? Many religious traditions feature leaders who claim to receive divine revelation about future events. But how reliable are these predictions? If a religious leader is truly inspired, we should expect consistent accuracy. Instead, history is littered with failed prophecies and revised interpretations. In the 19th century, preacher William Miller predicted that Jesus would return in 1844. When the prophecy failed, his followers, who had sold their belongings and prepared for the world's end, experienced what became known as the Great Disappointment. But rather than abandoning the belief, they reinterpreted the prophecy, leading to the formation of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. If divine revelation were real, why do religious leaders consistently get it wrong? And why do followers continue to rationalize failures instead of questioning the validity of the belief itself? If a religious leader's predictions repeatedly fail, is it truly faith, or just the human tendency to cling to belief at any cost? A true divine prophet should not have a worse track record than chance. If religious predictions fail just as often as random guesses, why should they be considered divine at all? If faith-based claims don't hold up to scientific testing, why do people still believe? The answer lies in emotion over reason. Many religions train followers to prioritize feelings over facts, leading them to dismiss evidence in favor of personal experiences. The burning in the bosom, Mormonism and emotional confirmation. Mormon missionaries teach that truth can be known not through evidence, but through feelings. Followers are encouraged to pray about the Book of Mormon and expect a burning in the bosom, a warm emotional confirmation of its truth. But psychologists recognize this as an example of emotional conditioning, not divine revelation. If truth is determined by feelings, and every contradictory religion that produces strong emotions must also be true, how can conflicting beliefs all be confirmed by the same emotional process? During high-energy worship services, people experience ecstatic states, speaking in tongues and feeling overwhelmed by the Holy Spirit. But studies on group psychology show that these states can be replicated in secular settings, such as concerts, political rallies, and hypnosis sessions. The emotions are real, but are they caused by God, or simply by the human brain's response to rhythmic music, social reinforcement, and emotional expectation? When religions teach that emotion is a better guide to truth than evidence, they create a system where belief is immune to reason. If faith demands that we ignore contradictory evidence, is it really about truth, or about maintaining belief at all costs? If faith-based claims were true, we would expect prayers and miracles to produce verifiable results, not placebo effects. Religious predictions to be consistently accurate, not subject to endless reinterpretation. Faith to align with evidence, not ask believers to reject it. But what we find is the opposite. Religions that discourage critical thinking, prioritize emotions over reason, and repeatedly fail empirical tests. So, we must ask, do we believe because it's true, or because we want it to be true? Are we holding faith to the same standard of evidence we use in the rest of life, or are we making exceptions for belief? We have explored the historical, ethical, philosophical, psychological, and empirical aspects of religious belief, breaking down the ways in which faith is shaped by culture, emotion, and authority. But the real challenge is not just to examine the beliefs of others. It is to turn these tools inward and scrutinize our own. If you've watched this series and thought, and this applies to other religions, but not mine, then that is exactly why you must take a closer look. Every faith tradition, including your own, makes claims about history, morality, divine authority, and the supernatural. The only way to determine what is true is to examine it critically, without exceptions, without excuses, and without fear. Ask yourself, have I applied the same skepticism to my own religion that I have applied to others? Am I willing to test my faith without special pleading or emotional bias? If my beliefs were false, would I want to know? Because truth should not require blind faith. It should withstand scrutiny. If your faith is true, it should emerge stronger from investigation. But if it crumbles under scrutiny, what does that say about its foundation? Religious leaders, institutions, and doctrines often discourage critical thinking, subtly or overtly, insisting that faith is more important than reason. But history has shown that truth is not found in dogma. It is discovered through inquiry, evidence, and the courage to question. If a belief is true, it does not need to be shielded from investigation. If a faith is divine, it should not require fear or guilt to keep people from leaving. The world is full of diverse religious claims, each insisting that they hold the exclusive truth. But the only way to determine what is real is to examine all of them, including your own, with the same level of scrutiny. You have two choices. You can cling to what is comfortable, refusing to question, or you can dare to seek the truth, even if it leads you away from long-held beliefs. One path offers certainty, but at the cost of intellectual honesty. The other path is uncertain, but it is the only way to truly know. No one can make this choice for you. Are you willing to ask the hard questions? Are you ready to investigate not just other religions, but your own? If you are, then congratulations, because you are no longer just a believer. You are a seeker of truth, and that is the only way to find what is real. If a religion is true, it should hold up to history, logic, and evidence. If it falls apart under scrutiny, maybe, just maybe, it isn't what it claims to be.